Welcome to this deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today because we're looking at a story that completely shatters how we think about music, endurance, and honestly.
And the fundamental concept of time itself, really. I'm your resident expert, and yeah, this one is wild.
It really is. I mean, imagine for a second the standard club DJ you might see today. You know the exact drill.
Oh, absolutely. They step into a high-tech elevated booth at some mega club.
Or like a massive festival stage, and they play a perfectly manicured, highly produced set for maybe 1 hour, maybe two. The crowd goes wild. The DJ waves.
They get a selfie.
Right. Takes a selfie, unplugs their headphones, and passes the deck to the next person on the lineup. It's a very clean, very scheduled transaction engineered to keep the bar busy.
Yeah, very predictable.
But now, I want you to erase that image entirely. Instead, imagine a single DJ standing in the dirt on a remote sandy beach in India, playing continuously without a single break for 8, 10, or even 24 hours straight.
It is an entirely different paradigm. It completely defies the biological limits we usually associate with, both performing and listening.
Oh, absolutely.
You're moving out of the realm of evening entertainment and into a test of sheer human endurance.
And today, our mission is to explore the source material chronicling the life of a man who made that exact grueling scenario his life's work. We're diving into the story of Goa Gil.
The American expat.
Yes.
Yeah.
The guy who essentially turned a completely off-the-grid beach party into a global spiritual music movement. We're going to figure out how and why he viewed the DJ deck not as some entertainment station, but as a literal altar for consciousness transformation.
Which is a huge distinction.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because you are about to learn how a fiercely DIY subculture fundamentally shifted the entire modern festival landscape.
And to really grasp the magnitude of that shift, we have to look beyond just the history of a music genre. What we are examining here is the history of how humans use rhythm collectively to alter their relationship with time. We aren't just talking about a party, we're talking about a psychological phenomenon.
To understand that phenomenon, we really have to go back to the setting, the edge of the world, basically.
Yeah.
The story starts with a guy named Gilbert Leaving. He was born in San Francisco in 1951. And if you do the math on that, it means he came of age right in the absolute epicenter of the 1960s counterculture.
The summer of love, all of that.
Exactly. He absorbed all of that psychedelic boundary-pushing energy. But as the 60s ended, that utopian dream in San Francisco started to fracture a bit.
Things got darker.
Yeah. So by the early 1970s, he packed up and migrated across the world to Goa, India.
Goa at the time was a major destination on the hippie trail. Westerners were traveling there specifically to escape the rigid post-war industrial structures of America and Europe.
They were looking for an out.
Exactly. They were looking for alternative ways of living, and Goa provided this incredibly isolated, culturally rich backdrop where the rules of Western society simply did not apply.
And the scene he helped cultivate there, specifically on the beaches of Anjuna and Baga, is so vivid in the historical accounts. There were no official venues.
Right. None.
These were semi-unofficial gatherings that just sort of sprung up on the sand. No glossy flyers passed around, no strict entry fees with bouncers and velvet ropes. It was entirely word of mouth.
He had to be in the know.
Yeah. You'd find out a gathering was happening because it was synced to the cycle of the full moon or tied to a specific local holiday, and the infrastructure was entirely raw.
Bare bones.
They'd drag out a sputtering gasoline-powered generator to run the sound system, string up some minimal lighting, throw up some handmade fluorescent decorations in the palm trees, and that was it.
It was incredibly rudimentary from a technical standpoint, but socially, it was a highly complex ecosystem operating entirely outside the commercial music industry.
The best way I can think to describe it based on the sources is that it wasn't a commercial event where you buy a ticket at a booth. It was more like a completely organic, seasonal phenomenon.
Like a monsoon.
Yes. Like a monsoon of music. It just rolls in, transforms the landscape, completely takes over the environment for a while, and then quietly dissolves when the sun comes up.
What's fascinating here is the isolation of that monsoon. Because they were so disconnected from the commercial music labels of the West, it created a closed-loop laboratory.
Right.
The early soundtrack wasn't electronic at all. It was an incredibly eclectic mix of acoustic rock, psychedelic rock, progressive rock, funk, and whatever disco records travelers happened to bring with them in their backpacks.
It was sonic natural selection, really. If the groove worked, you kept it. If it didn't, you tossed it.
Exactly.
But eventually, the acoustic guitars and funk records just couldn't cut through the ambient noise of the beach anymore. As the gatherings grew, they needed something louder, more driving, something that could physically command a larger space.
And that necessity perfectly collided with the 1980s.
Right, the tech caught up.
Synthesizers became cheaper, smaller, and portable enough to drag onto a beach. This is a crucial technological pivot. You start getting this influx of European electronic music, early acid house, and electronic body music, or EBM.
Yeah, we should probably clarify what that actually sounded like for you listening at home.
Good call. EBM was characterized by these very rigid, mechanistic driving drum beats. And acid house was defined by the Roland TB-303 synthesizer, which created this squelchy, alien, almost liquid bass line.
The whole sound shifted.
Entirely.
Yeah.
It went from acoustic instruments playing melodies to drum machines and synthesizers creating repetitive hypnotic loops.
The instruments changed, but as our sources highlight, the real revolutionary shift was the manipulation of time. This is where Goa Gil truly separates himself from the traditional concept of a DJ.
Oh, without a doubt.
The records show him playing solo sets that stretch from nightfall until the following evening. We are talking 10 to 24 hours. Just him behind the decks, controlling the sound for an entire day and night.
It's unbelievable.
But I have to stop you here and ask what anyone listening is probably thinking. Logistically, how does a human being stand there playing records for an entire day and night? Are there bathroom breaks? What happens when he needs water?
Right, the physical reality of it.
And the crowd. Your feet would literally be bleeding by hour 14. Wait, wouldn't people just get totally exhausted?
Yeah.
How and why do you keep a crowd moving for an entire day and night?
It's the most logical question to ask when you view this through the lens of modern entertainment. But the answer lies in the fundamental intent of the gathering. The goal was never entertainment.
Okay.
You don't dance for 18 hours to be entertained. The goal was a ritual. The Source's FAQ section explicitly addresses this. Goa Gil viewed these marathon sets as an absolute necessity for what he called consciousness transformation.
So it had to be that long.
Exactly. In his philosophy, sustained, unrelenting time was required to break down the ego.
So the physical agony is the point.
Precisely. You have to reach that point of extreme physical exhaustion. That's the barrier to entry. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't a new concept at all.
No.
Not at all. It closely mirrors ancient communal endurance rituals. Think of Sufi whirling dervishes spinning for hours or indigenous endurance dances.
Oh, wow. Right.
The repetitive rhythm, sustained far beyond normal waking limits, forces the brain to shift gears. You physically cannot maintain your daily anxieties or your sense of self when you are that exhausted. The modern mechanical construct of time dissolves.
You stop watching the clock.
Yeah, and you become entirely present in the rhythmic moment.
Okay, so it's not just a guy stubbornly refusing to give up the turntables. It's a highly engineered psychological experience. And because these sets were so massively long, they couldn't just be a random shuffle of tracks. There had to be an architecture to it to guide people through that exhaustion.
Right, it had to be structured.
Goa Gil actually developed a specific 4-phase structural model for these marathons, which he termed psychedelic yoga.
The set was designed to guide the crowd through distinct physiological and psychological states, mapping environmental cues to auditory input.
Let's actually put you, the listener, on that beach and walk through this journey. It's 10 p.m. You're in phase 1, which is the warm-up.
The tracks are mid-tempo.
Yeah, the sound is just setting the space, getting people physically grounded on the sand, leaving whatever baggage they brought with them at the edge of the jumble.
A transition phase, really.
But then, say around 2 a.m., we hit phase 2, the midnight acceleration.
This is where the physical demand begins. He would start actively raising the BPM, the beats per minute, driving the tempo up to physically induce that trance state we were just talking about.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The midnight acceleration is exactly like a marathon runner hitting the runner's high.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
If you've ever run long distances, you know those first few miles hurt. But around mile 18, your body is screaming at you to quit. That's what 3 a.m. on this dance floor feels like.
Just utter exhaustion.
You have to push past that initial agonizing physical fatigue where your brain is begging you to just lie down on the sand and go to sleep. But if you push through it, your body eventually dumps a massive flood of endorphins.
And that biochemical dump is exactly what the music is engineered to trigger, which brings us to phase 3, the sunrise climax.
The payoff.
Exactly. As the actual sun starts physically peeking over the ocean horizon, the music shifts to become highly uplifting, deeply emotive. It's the collective emotional payoff for surviving the night.
And then there's more.
Right. Finally, phase 4. The daytime psychedelic phase. The sun is fully up, the heat of the Indian morning is bearing down, and the music shifts again into darker, weirder, more experimental territory for the survivors who are still moving.
The music is actually facilitating a biochemical reaction.
You bet.
But for that to work, the music itself had to be structured differently than normal club tracks, right?
Absolutely. The mechanics of the music had to evolve to support this specific journey. The source material points out a crucial distinction. The floor was a space not for dancing, but for immersion.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
Well, in a traditional club track, you have frequent breakdowns. That's the moment where the beat drops out completely, the crowd puts their hands in the air, cheers, and waits for the bass to drop again.
Clubs love breakdowns because it gives people a chance to stop dancing and go buy a drink.
Exactly. But Goa Gil avoided those completely.
He had to, right? A breakdown interrupts the trance.
Neurologically, yes. To enter those altered brainwave states, like moving into a theta state, the brain needs continuous, unbroken repetition. So instead of drops, these tracks were layered with multi-layered synthesizer arpeggios that just loop and spiral, pulling you deeper inward.
Wow.
It was a vehicle for immersion. Breaking the rhythm would be like waking a sleepwalker.
As we move into the 1990s, that sonic vehicle gets a massive upgrade. The world starts to shrink a bit, and Goa isn't quite as isolated anymore. Gil is armed with analog records, test pressings, and unreleased tracks from European acid and techno labels.
He was a tastemaker.
He's getting music before anyone else and testing it out on the beach. The BPMs, which started maybe in the low 130s, are getting pushed faster and faster, reaching 150 BPM at the peak of the night.
The music is becoming significantly more aggressive and highly specialized. Entire labels are springing up just to cater to this specific sound, which is now officially being called Goa trance.
And the tracks that define these sunrise peaks are legendary in that world. We're talking about foundational anthems. Astral Projections track, Mahadeva, Hallucinogens, LSD,
Classics.
Man with No Name's Teleport, Infected Mushrooms becoming insane.
Yeah.
When you listen to these tracks, you can hear the density. They are incredibly complex, aggressively fast, and deeply interwoven with the psychedelic culture of the scene, as you can probably guess from titles like LSD.
Yeah, that's not subtle.
No, not at all. They were engineered to maximize that exact, overwhelming sunrise moment on the beach. But here's the crazy part. It didn't stay on the beach. In the 90s, this hyper-local sand-between-your-toes sound explodes globally.
It becomes a massive international export, carrying the DNA of those early beach parties with it.
Suddenly, you have Israeli trance events deep in the desert. You have mega parties carved out in the jungles of Brazil. You have gatherings out in the Mojave Desert in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they are all exporting the aesthetics of that Indian beach.
The whole visual identity.
Yeah, the stages are suddenly flanked by Hindu statues covered in intricate psychedelic art, draped in fluorescent fabrics that glow under UV lights. But considering how aggressive tracks like Becoming Insane sound, makes me wonder. When the music evolved into late 90s psytrance, becoming much faster, darker, with heavier bass lines and denser spaces, did it lose that original organic beach vibe? Did the machines take over?
That is the exact tension that happens to any subculture when it scales up and globalizes. But the source text provides a crucial insight into Gil's mindset regarding this evolution. To Goa Gil, the genre name, the specific tempo, the label on the record, none of that actually mattered. The journey did. Yes, the music mutated. It became heavier, darker, and more mechanized. But the structure of the long set and the inherent ritualistic nature of the gathering remained entirely intact.
So as long as the 24-hour arc was preserved, the specific synthesizer sounds were just details.
Exactly. Whether he was playing on a humid beach in India or a dusty field in Europe, the party crossed borders, but the flow of time remained identical. He rigidly enforced that ritual curve regardless of the geography or the era.
He was entirely uncompromising about the format. And that dedication brings us into the 21st century. Even as we get into the 2000s and the 2010s, as Goa Gil aged into his 60s and 70s, he absolutely refused to shorten his set.
He stuck to his duns.
The festival world around him was commercializing rapidly. Promoters wanted to pack 10 different DJs onto a lineup to sell more tickets, giving everyone a clean, easily digestible 90 minutes. But Gil held his ground. If you booked him, you booked the marathon.
His stamina, both physical and ideological, is genuinely staggering when you consider the physical toll of simply standing and operating machinery for 24 hours at the age of 70.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the most poignant detail in all of our sources is about his final years. Even after being diagnosed with a severe form of cancer, he didn't stop. He continued to play these grueling, physically demanding marathon sets while actively battling illness, right up until his death in 2023 at the age of 72.
It's incredible.
He essentially played until he physically couldn't stand behind the decks anymore.
Which is just deeply profound. And this raises an important question regarding what we take away from all this. What is his ultimate legacy? Because it's too simplistic to say he just helped invent a genre of electronic music.
Right, it's bigger than that.
As our source explicitly states, his greatest legacy is the concept of the never-ending set itself. When you look at today's massive, multi-million-dollar psychedelic festivals events that run on relentless 24-hour timetables where the music literally never stops for a week, those are the direct descendants of Gil's early generator-powered beach experiments.
He laid the blueprint.
He proved that an audience could and would surrender to a continuous day-long sonic experience.
So what does this all mean for you and me? We've traced this incredible journey from the 1970s, starting with acoustic jam sessions on a humid beach, all the way to a global 150 BPM electronic ritual that spans continents. And I think this deep dive seriously challenges how we consume art and culture today.
Oh, without a doubt.
We live in an era of bite-sized, easily digestible content. We get impatient if a song has a 20-second intro. We skip ahead.
Yeah.
We consume things in tiny fragments.
Our attention spans are basically gone.
But Goa Gil demanded something entirely different. He demanded hours of your life. He asked for your exhaustion, your absolute patience, and your sustained attention. And in return, he promised to give you a moment of transcendence that you couldn't reach any other way.
It's a profound trade-off. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to consider the next time you look at your phone. If Goa Gil originally used this 24-hour rhythmic immersion to help people escape the rigid structures of the 20th century, we have to ask what rhythms we are unconsciously subjecting ourselves to today.
Oh, that's a good point.
We live in a world where our attention is constantly being fractured into 15-second intervals by algorithms. The endless scrolling of our social media feeds is, in its own way, a highly repetitive, hypnotic rhythm.
It's a trance of its own.
Exactly. But instead of breaking down the ego to connect us to a community, it often isolates us. In that context, choosing to commit an entire day and night to a single, continuous communal experience might be the ultimate modern act of rebellion against the digital trance we are all currently trapped in. What would happen to your own perception of reality if you simply refused to look at a clock or a screen for 24 hours?
From the perfectly scheduled one-hour DJ set in a VIP club to the endless, timeless rhythm on the sand, the clock is entirely up to you. Thanks for diving deep with us.